Hi folks, hope you're enjoying and benefiting from our guitar lesson series. Remember, it's essential that you watch these lesson videos in order. Each lesson leads into the next, and you won't get the big picture if you skip any of the steps. Many of you have been searching for these answers for years. You might be tempted to jump ahead and look at lesson 24 because you're into the blues, but if you don't know your intervals and modes from lesson 12 and 17, you just ain't going to get it. Consider purchasing the 150-page official course handbook for $19.95 from our website at www.absolutelyunderstandguitar.com. You'll find that link multiple places here on our YouTube channel. Each of the 32 video lessons has a corresponding printable page that you can view to help with review and memorization. All of the charts and graphs I create in the videos are reprinted there. The package also includes our amazing chord, scale, and arpeggio encyclopedia containing most every useful finger pattern known to man. Reserve your copy today. If you like what you're learning here, tell all your friends and like and subscribe to our channel. So enjoy this lesson and continue on, and you will absolutely understand guitar.
Hi, welcome back to Absolutely Understand Guitar. I'm Scotty West. Today we're going to delve a little deeper into the fascinating world of scales. Last lesson, we investigated the basic interval structure of our 14 must-know scales. Today we're going to listen to them and learn what they sound like. We'll also begin to examine the finger patterns so you can play them on your fretboard. This is lesson 15, so make sure you're looking at page 15 in your booklet. You might also want to pull out all those colored scale finger charts in there as well. We'll be looking at them today too. All set? Here we go. Hi, welcome back. Today we got a lot more stuff to talk about scales. We got a little pressed for time there at the end last week, and not only that, all we got a chance to do last week was investigate the basic structure of these scales. Today, we're going to show you how to play them, and we're also going to start doing a little bit of ear training on how these different scales sound like. Quick little review of what we did last week. Remember, we're in level number 4 of what I call my 6 levels of pitch theory. First, there was silence. Then there was the single note, where we learned that most conventional music, there's always a root note. There's always a central note in the piece. Then the next most complex patterns involve 2 notes, and that's the whole fascinating subject of intervals, which we finished off a couple of hours ago. Now, last week we got to level number 4. Now that we understand what intervals are, we begin to string intervals together in sequences, and these are what scales are all about. And there are about 70 different types of scales in the world. There's about 30-odd scales in Western music. And we're right now looking at our basic list of what I call the must-know scales, which has 14 different scales on it. A chromatic scale, major diatonic, Lydian mode, mixolydian, melodic minor, Dorian, Phrygian, Aeolian, harmonic minor, pentatonic scales, minor pentatonic scales, whole tone scales, diminished scales, and last but not least, the Locrian mode down here at the bottom. Now, what we're going to do with each one of these as we go through them is we're going to reinvestigate their interval patterns briefly, then we're going to listen to them, and I'm also going to start to show you how to finger these on the neck. Now, let's just quickly remind ourselves of our first pattern up here, our good old friend, the chromatic scale. Remember, a chromatic scale is when you're playing all 12 notes in our pitch system. And if you recall, the way you do that on the guitar, hopefully you've been practicing these all along. I've been reminding you to do that. Anywhere up the neck of the guitar, it's a matter of your 4 fingers on your 4 frets, but also understanding about your finger shifts. So if you recall, when you go up the scale, you're using your index finger to shift with, and when you're coming down the scale, you use your pinky. So here's a chromatic scale, if you've forgotten how it goes. All half steps. A chromatic scale is when you play all 12 notes, and they're all separated by half steps. There's my index shifts when I'm going up the scale. And when I'm coming down the scale, I do shifts with my pinky. When you're playing a chromatic scale, the way you kind of want to look at that is that's like you're typing the alphabet on your typewriter. You're playing all 12 notes. All of these other scales that we learn about, you're simply leaving certain notes out. You know, for example, any given word in the English language does not contain all 26 letters of the English alphabet. So you could think of a word in the English alphabet like cat as being the English alphabet with everything left out of it except CAT. When we look at these scales, you can think of these as being a chromatic scale with everything left out of it except whatever notes are actually in that scale. Of course, the first scale that we want to make sure we understand about after the chromatic scale is our good old friend, the major diatonic scale. Remember, that's the one we learned way back when with the musical number system. That is the central aesthetic scale in Western music. Some of you have maybe been told some different things, but I think you really ought to look at it that way. And that's that good old scale they taught us way back in kindergarten. It's that, and let's listen to it, it's that good old thing that goes do, well, actually, let me go down an octave. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Now, we've all heard that pattern of notes before. As you recall, that scale, remember, every scale is a particular pattern of intervals. They're mostly made up of whole steps and half steps, which are also called, if you recall, they're called minor seconds and major seconds. We also have a few scales on this page that have step and a half intervals in them. Those are called augmented seconds. So one generalization about scales is they are different sequences of seconds. Minor seconds, major seconds, and augmented seconds. You might recall that our major diatonic scale, the central pitch pattern that all the other ones are kind of, I want to say, compared to, has an interval pattern of whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Or in other words, it's mostly whole steps, except between the third and fourth note and the seventh and eighth note. Those are only half steps apart. And if you play that pattern of intervals, no matter what note of the 12 notes you start on, you're always going to get that thing that sounds like a do, re, mi scale. Half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, like that. Now, so that's what that sounds like. You're all kind of familiar with that. Now, let's talk about how to finger that scale. Now, you might recall when we first looked at the major diatonic scale, also known as the Ionian mode, by the way. When we talk next week about the fascinating subject of modes, you're going to find out what all that stuff is about. Back when we learned the major the musical number system, we learned about the major diatonic scale for the first time, and at that point I showed you some finger patterns for those. You might recall these three different fingerings for a major diatonic scale. The first one that everybody tends to learn is this one right here. Now, if you look at this finger pattern right here, you'll see that this directly reflects what we understand about the interval pattern for a major scale. For example, it's a whole step from note number 1 to note number 2. It's a whole step from note number 2 to note number 3. Half step to 4, whole step to 5, whole step to 6, whole step to 7, half step to 8. We can also go another octave, 1, whole step to 2, whole step to 3, half step to 4. Whole step to 5 would normally bring you to this fret right here, but remember, this is your G string and your B string, which are tuned one note closer together, so our 5 has to be moved up a fret to compensate for that tuning difference. Whole step to 6, whole step to 7, half step to 8. That's 2 octaves worth of a major scale. Remember, those two notes are 2 octaves apart. That note right there is an octave above that note, so it's 1 octave to there and then another octave from there to there. Now, this is not the only way to play a major scale. Take a look at this chart again here and notice this. The way that this particular scale works right here is if your root note, if do, is actually under your second finger on your low E string. That you'd actually be playing that with your second finger on your low E string there. But let me ask you this. Is that the only place where do can be? Is that the only place where you're going to find the root note of that scale? No. Remember, do can actually be anywhere. And all that means is you're playing in a different key. Your root note, note number 1, does not have to be there. It could be there, or it could be there, or there, or there, or there, or there. In fact, it could even be on some of these shaded frets up here. And that's how you wind up playing these patterns in all of the 12 different keys. You just choose a different note to start on. So what that means, now there are 12 notes. So what that means is as we go through the fingerings for these different scales, you're going to see that there are actually, I'm going to say, 12 different ways to play any scale. There are actually 12 different fingerings for a major scale. So far we looked at this one, And why did we look at this one? This is a really easy one. Notice how, just coincidentally, because of the way the intervals fall, there are no finger shift notes anywhere. Notice that all of the notes that are in the scale will fall very comfortably within the 4 frets that your fingers actually occupy. So these are one of the easier ways to play a major scale, with do under your second finger on your low E string. Another one that I showed you was this one. Now, this is yet another way to play a major scale. This is another easy way to play a major scale. Again, just coincidentally, because of the way that the intervals fall, you don't have to do any finger shifts. You don't wind up having to play any of those notes where you have to reach out or shift with your index finger or your pinky. In this case, this is simply another fingering for the major diatonic scale, but this time your root note, do, is under your pinky on your A string. And then we see 1, whole step to 2, whole step to 3, half step to 4, whole step to 5, whole step to 6. Now, whole step to 7 would normally bring you here, so you might think that you have to reach out of the box there, but you don't actually, because you can also play 7 there. Whole step from 6 to 7. Remember, these are the 2 strings that are tuned differently. Half step to 8. We can also go a partial way up into a second octave. 1, whole step to 2, whole step to 3, half step to 4, whole step to 5. We can also go a partial way down into a previous octave. You can think of this as being note number 8. Remember, 1 and 8 are both do. 1 and 8 are both the root note. 8, half step down to 7, whole step down to 6. Whole step down to 5, whole step down to 4, whole step down to 3. So you can't actually play 2 full octaves in any particular direction using this because your root note starts so far along in the sequence. But it's still 2 1/3 octaves, as you might recall, from that note to that note right there. So you can play a total of 2 1/3 octaves. You simply can't play 2 full octaves in any particular direction. Now, those were the first 2 fingerings we showed you for a major scale, because those are really like the easiest ones because they don't have any finger shifts in them. Now, the third one that I'm going to show you is one where you can see that there has to be a finger shift in it. If do is under your pinky on your low E string, then to play this same major diatonic scale finger pattern, 1, whole step to 2, whole step to 3, half step to 4, whole step to 5, whole step to 6, when we go a whole step to 7, we are going to have to go to one of these shaded frets. When you're going up the scale, you're going to use that note as your, and you're going to play that as an index finger reach, and then you're going to scoot it across the fret like we learned in the chromatic scale. 7, shift your finger up to play the 8 right there. And you can see there's no way around that. In this particular fingering for a major scale, you have to do that 1 finger shift right there. Those are the first 3 fingerings that I showed you for a major scale because those are basically the easiest ones. But remember, those are only 3 out of 12 different ways to play a major scale because there are 12 different notes. So let's take a look at this finger chart right here. I think you're going to find that these are actually very, very interesting charts here. So I like to think they're some of the best you might ever see. I'm going to explain this color coding system to you in a moment. Take a look at this chart right here. This, as you can see, is your major diatonic scale. This is your Ionian mode. Oh, that's okay. It's Ionian mode. This is your major diatonic scale. And if we could zoom out just a little and take a look at this whole page for a second. These are actually the 12 different ways to play a major scale, all right on this page right here. Now, the ones that I have shown you so far are the easiest ones that don't involve going to any of these gray shaded frets right here. For example, number 3 is one that we've already looked at. See, there's no finger dots in either of these shaded frets here. Number 10 is another one of the ones I've shown you. See, all of the dots are on the white frets. There's none on the gray frets. That indicates that there's no finger shifts required. And the one that just had 1 finger shift is this one right here, number 5. And you have that 1 finger shift that you have to play right there between those 2. You see, there's just no way to avoid it. That's the last one I showed you. Now, let me explain this color coding system to you. I think this is very slick myself. I came up with this a while ago. Notice how all the dots on these charts are all colored Now, the way this works, remember, right now we're looking at the major scale, but another thing that you'll observe about most of the scales that we've learned so far is they all have one thing in common. Most of them, not all of them, have 8 notes per octave, 7 individual notes, plus your 8th note is your octave note, which is a repeat, if you will, of the first note you played. So there are actually what are called 7 degrees to any given, to these particular scales. Now, you might also recall, if you remember back to science class, the colors of the spectrum. Do you remember that stuff? You know, if you shine light through a prism, it breaks it down into the colors of the rainbow. Now, if you haven't heard this before, let me tell you a little bit about that. If you look at a rainbow, the colors are always in the same order, and the way they were always taught me to learn this is to remember the name. It's like the name of a person, the name Roy G. Biv. R-O-Y-G B-I-V. Now, you're going to see also when we send the book to you that there's going to be a color chart in there that is like a key to understanding all this. But for now, remember Roy G. Biv, and that's R-O-Y-G-B-I-V. And those are the colors of the spectrum in order. R is for red, O is for orange, Y is for yellow. So there's Roy, R-O-Y, red, orange, yellow. G is green. And then the last name is Biv, B-I-V, blue, indigo, which is kind of a deep blue, and then V is for violet. So your colors of the spectrum in order are red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And that's what I use to show you the 7 degrees of the major scale. For example, your root note, note number 1 in your scale every time is going to be in red. So if we can look back here at the chart again, and maybe we'll kind of focus in on number 3 down here for a moment. This is the first one I showed you where the root note is under your 2nd finger on your low E string. Notice that's note number 1, and it's in red. So that's your root note. Notice that there are 2 other red dots on this chart right here, too. Those are your octave notes. That's note number 1. That's note number 1 again, but in the next octave higher, and that's note number 1 that's at the end of your 2nd octave. Remember, and there they are right on the same fret on your 2 outside strings. Now, red is note number 1. It's a whole step to note number 2, which is orange. It's a whole step to note number 3, which is yellow. And you can see, what's nice about this is you can see where all the octaves are of any given number. Like, for example, there's 3, and there's another yellow dot, which is an octave above that yellow dot. So that's 3. Green is 4, so that's do, re, mi, fa, 4. There's the octave note up in the next octave. And you'll really start to learn, you might even recognize from our discussion on intervals that those 2 green dots there, note number 4, are an octave apart. Remember, an octave on the guitar is always 2 strings over and 2 frets up. Then sure enough, there it is again, right there, green and green. That's note number 4. Whole step to 5, which is blue. Whole step to 6, which is indigo. That's that deep blue. Whole step to 7, which is violet. And then a half step to 8 again for your octave. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That's the basic way to understand these finger charts. The 7 degrees of the scale are color-coded to the colors of the spectrum, of the Roy G. Biv thing. Now, let's take a look at this whole chart again here, and let me show you this. This is how this chart actually works. Remember we said there are 12 different ways to play a major scale, and that do could essentially be anywhere? Well, the first one we looked at, remember, was this one, because it was an easy one, where do was under your 2nd finger on your low E string. But remember, do can be on any one of these frets right here. And this chart represents a progressive way of looking at the 12 different scales. Maybe we could zoom in and tilt up to this upper box here, and we'll kind of do a tilt down through these 3 as we go, and we'll compare how they actually work here. Now, if you look at this first one up here, notice that do is the lowest note that you could possibly play in this position here. It actually isn't even in the 4 frets that your fingers occupy. It's actually itself an index finger reach out of the box down here. That's the lowest key that you could play with your hand in any given position. And this could be anywhere on the neck. Remember, these 6 frets here are not just the 6 frets down at the bottom of your neck. These can be any 6 frets anywhere up and down the neck of the guitar. with your hand in any position, the first key that you could play in actually would be where your index finger is actually reaching out of the box an extra fret. Maybe I'll show you this on the neck of the guitar too for a second here. Let me put this down and grab my guitar. Let's say that your fingers are actually occupying this area of the neck right here, so that your index finger is on your 5th fret. Now, remember, your open strings are largely useless to you, so we might suggest that this note on your low E string is kind of the lowest note that your hand can actually control. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. That's the fret where your index finger is normally right now going to be located. You might also know that that note is an A because it's the 5th fret on your low E string. Now, Do could be anywhere. It could be here, it could be here, it could be here, it could be here, it could be on my next string on any one of the 4 frets or on my next string on any of the 4 frets. The first lowest key that we're looking at is if Do is on your low E string, but it's even lower than where your 4 frets are, it's actually here. It's actually a finger reach note out of your 4-finger box. And that was that lowest red dot on your chart right there. And now if we can go back to that chart, we'll see that that's that dot right there. Now, we can play a major scale. That is, we can play that finger pattern that we understand to be a major diatonic scale, which has mostly whole steps except between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. If we start right there, you'll notice it's a whole step to 2, and then it's another whole step to 3, and then it's a half step to 4. Now notice 4 is in green, and we see a green dot there, and we also see a green dot there. Remember, those are the same note, aren't they? If you remember back to your chromatic scale fingering, when it comes to doing finger shifts, you can play the same note either by shifting your pinky out to that fret right there, that gray fret, or you can reach out an extra fret with your index finger and play that note there. Remember, generally when you're going up the scale, you're going to be playing the notes with your index finger. So you'd be using this upper green dot up here. And the way you would play this is you would start with a finger reach here and play 1. You would go to your second finger again, because when you come back into the box, you want to try to use the finger that actually is controlling that fret anyway and play the orange dot, which remember, orange is always note number 2. Then a whole step to your pinky, which is note number 3. And then to get that half step to 4, going up the scale, you're going to reach out an extra fret with your index finger and play note number 4 there. And then a whole step to 5, which would be back to your second finger again. And then a whole step to 6, which is back to your pinky again. And then a whole step to 7, which is back to your index finger again on your D string. And then a half step to 8. There's your first octave right there. And you had to do these 2 index finger shifts right there. Now in the second octave, it's a little easier for a while. 1, whole step to 2. Whole step to 3, half step to 4, whole step to 5, whole step to 6, whole step to 7. But now look at note number 8. It's not going to be on the unshaded frets. It has to be a finger stretch or a finger reach or a finger shift note out of the box. When you're going up the scale, remember you generally play these notes with your index finger. That red dot is the same note as that red dot right there. So coming up the scale, after we got to note number 6, note number 7, we reach out an extra fret with our index finger and play our Do note again right there. And we can also go a partial way up into a 3rd octave. Index finger reach to that note, then up a whole step to note number 2, then up a whole step to your pinky, and then I actually included that note right there because it certainly is a possible note for you to play, but you'd have to play that with a pinky shift. Now, when you're coming down the scale, remember, you're not going to use these index shifts up here that are hidden by my finger right now. Maybe I should have done that before. When you're going up the scale, see the red, green, red, that's the same as these dots right here, that green and that red. When you're going up the scale, you don't use these. You don't use your pinky shifts. You use these up here. However, when you're coming down the scale, as we learned with our chromatic scale, you're going to shift with your pinky. So now you can start on, say, note number 3, and you're going backwards. 3, whole step down to 2, whole step down to 1 means that you're going to have to shift your pinky out a half step to that shaded fret right there. And then you're going to do actually a pinky shift to get you to note number 7, which is a half step below note number 8, which is the same as 1, of course, which is the red dot. 7 is violet, which is a half step below 8. whole step down to 6, which would be to your second finger, and then to your pinky on the next lower string to note number 5, whole step down to your second finger to play note number 4, half step down to 3 to your index finger, then you switch to the next string to play note number 2, which is a whole step below 3, whole step down to your root note, your octave note again, then 8, 7, half step, whole step down to 6, whole step down to 5. But when it comes to note number 4, you're going to have to reach out again and play this note with your pinky. That's note number 4, and then scoot your finger, your pinky, to its normal fret right there to play note number 3, and then down a whole step to note number 2, and then to get your lowest root note down there, again, you are going to have to reach out with your index finger. Now let me show you this finger pattern actually on the guitar here. And I won't have to show you, hopefully, too many more of these after this. You'll just be able to kind of figure this out for yourself. Remember, I had my index finger on my 5th fret right here. I was suggesting that the 6 frets on the neck of the guitar that I was actually going to control are the 4 frets that my fingers are actually on. My index finger is going to reach out to get notes on that fret, and my pinky is going to reach out to get notes on this fret back here. Remember, these notes on these frets are the same as the notes on these frets, so you have an option as to where to play that 5th note on each string. Now, in this particular case, we were suggesting that Do was actually an index finger reach down here. And then to play the scale, going up the scale, it's 1, whole step to 2. Notice how I'm going to my second finger because that is the finger that would have normally controlled that fret anyway. I want to resist the temptation to shift my whole hand down and play note number 3 there. So, note number 1, whole step to note number 2, whole step to note number 3, which I would play with my pinky, then a half step to 4 is going to bring me out of the box again on my A string. That's note number 4, whole step to 5, whole step to 6, whole step to 7, half step to 8. So I've got a couple of index finger reaches that I'm going to have to do. On my E string and my A string going up the scale, I'm going to have to use my index finger to go out of the box. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now as I do my second octave, there's note number 1. It's an octave above the note I started on. And I go 1, whole step to 2 under my pinky, whole step to 3 on the next string, my index finger. Now it's a half step to 4, so I go right to there, whole step to 5. Now a whole step to 6 would normally take me to my index finger on the next string, but remember this is your G string and your B string, which are tuned 1 note closer together. So actually I have to go up to my second finger to note number 6, whole step to note number 7. Then I need a half step, so that means I'm going to have to reach out of the box again to get my index finger shift, my reach note there. And then I can go also a part of a way, 1, 2, 3, up into another octave. So my whole scale goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then a second octave. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 1, 2, 3. I can go up a little ways more. Now when I come down, I'm going to play those notes that are out of the box with my pinky instead of my index finger. I know this is a little confusing. You may have to look at this a couple of times and really look your charts over, but particularly if you understand your finger shift stuff, which we talked about back with the chromatic scale, it should become fairly obvious how these work. This is 3, 2, now 1 this time. I'm going to have to reach out. You could actually look at that upper left-hand finger chart there in your booklet and follow me as I go with my fingers. 3, 2, 1 is actually going to be a pinky shift, and then 8, 7 is actually a pinky shift to here. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, half step to 3, 2, 1. So I didn't have any shifts to do in the middle of the neck right there. Now if I go down a lower octave, it's 8, 7, 6, 5, but I am going to have to reach out an extra fret with my pinky. 4, half step to 3, whole step down to 2, and then I'm going to have to stretch out a little bit with my index finger to get note number 1. So this is an example of a scale that you cannot count on being able to play within the 4-finger box. Remember, a lot of friends are going to try to tell you that you can control the neck of the guitar by only controlling 4 frets. But you know better than that. You know that you actually have to control 5 frets to control the neck of the guitar. And any of the notes on that 5th fret can either be played by shifting your pinky out an extra fret or by shifting out your index finger an extra fret. And when you're going up the scale, you generally do the shifts with your index finger, and when you're coming down the scale, you generally do the shifts with your pinky. Now, let's look back at our chart here again. And I'm just going to try to show you the rest of how this chart actually works here. Maybe we could take a look at this upper one here, and we'll kind of tilt down as we go through these different ones here. Now remember, there are 12 different ways to play a major scale. In fact, there are 12 different ways to play any of your scales. And any one of these notes can be note number 1. Any one of the notes on any one of these frets can be the red dot. Here, it was the absolute lowest note we could play out of where do was actually a finger reach note off of the 4 frets that our fingers actually occupy on. Now take a look at this next chart down here. Notice this. Do is no longer out of the box. It's actually moved up 1 fret. So this would mean that we could use this finger box to play a major scale in the next key. The next key higher. For example, if that previous one was A, then this one here, the second one here, with your hand in exactly in the same place on the neck, you could now begin to play a B flat major scale. Now do is actually simply under your index finger within the box. We have the same color coding system here. We have the same intervals between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8, which is yellow and green and violet back to red again. But notice this, now here, since we're going up the scale, we are not going to be thinking about these notes on this shaded fret down here. We're going to be playing them, by shifting with our index finger up here. Now notice 1, whole step to 2. Now immediately to get note number 3, we're going to have to change to our next string and reach out of the box and play 3 there, and then do an index finger shift to 4, whole step to 5. Then we're going to have to reach out of the box again. You see, this is the second way to play a major scale, and notice how there's a finger shift on actually almost every string. This is a rather difficult fingering for a major scale. I'm not going to encourage you right now to try to learn all the ones on this page. I say just start with the easiest ones, like those first 3 we looked at, and then gradually work your way out to the ones that have 1 finger shift, and then work your way out to the ones that have 2 finger shifts, and then the ones that have 3 finger shifts. And then finally, you're going to get out to ones like this, where you have a finger shift on almost every string. Those are kind of difficult to learn. And, you know, I'm not sure a lot of players use a lot of those really aggravating, difficult finger patterns anyway. I'm sure the really advanced players do. But even if you knew how to play the easy ones, you'd be doing pretty darn good. Now, remember, with this box right here, when we're coming down the scale, we're going to be, these notes that we can play with our shifts in this fret up here are the same as the notes that we can play in this fret with our pinky. So when we're coming down the scale, we're not going to use those notes right there. We're actually going to go, now here's note number 8, and a half step back to note number 7 takes me out to a pinky reach. And then a whole step down to 6, and a whole step down to 5. A whole step down to 4 actually brings me to my 3rd finger on my G string. 4 goes a half step down to 3, and then a whole step down to 2 once again takes me to a pinky shift note out of the box. Whole step down to back to the root note again, to do, note number 1. You could also think of that as being note number 8 for the previous octave, and 8, 7, reach out of the box with your pinky, 6, whole step down to 5, whole step down to 4, reach out again with your pinky, a lot of shifts in this particular way to play a major scale, and then down to note number 2, and then finally back to the root note again. Now let me shift this page here. Let's go back to that shot again, or actually the close-up. Now, this is the second one. Remember when we looked at the first one here, do was actually out of the box. Then, in the second one, do actually moved up a fret to be under your index finger. on where it usually is. Now, if we look at number 3 down here, notice how do isn't there, do isn't there. Do's actually moved up another fret, so it's under your second finger on your low E string. And of course, these are the octave notes of that, these other red dots right here. Now, notice this one. This is number 3. This is the one I already showed you because this is one of the easy ones. This is one of the ones you're going to want to master first. This is the one that I showed you where do is under your second finger, and then coincidentally, just the way the intervals in your fingers fall, you don't have any finger shifts to do on any of these different strings right here. This is number 3. Now, in number 4, do is going to move up again to be under your third finger on your low E string, and that's this one over here. If we can zoom in on that one. Or just take the shot and I can move it to that spot right there. Right. Now, see, do is under your third finger here, and if do is there, which is going to be under your third finger, like that, then once again, you wind up having to do a lot of finger shifts. 1, and when you're going up the scale, you use your index finger. 1, whole step to 2, which is actually an index reach out, whole step to 3, half step to 4, whole step to 5 is out of the box again, whole step to 6, whole step to 7, and even your root note again is out of the box again. A lot of finger shifts. Going up the scale, you play those notes with your index finger. Coming down the scale, you play those exact same notes with your pinky. 8, down to 7, reach out with your pinky to 6, down to 5, down to 4, down to 3, down to 2, reach out again with your pinky to get the root note, shift to get down from 8 to 7, whole step down to 6, out of the box again to 5, down to 4, a whole step, half step down to 3, whole step down to 2, whole step down to 1, and then that's 1, and you could actually even reach that note number 7 in the previous octave right there. After that, do moves up again. So now do is under your pinky on your low E string. We have now played a major scale starting on each one of the frets on our low E string. This is another easy one. Notice how you only have one finger shift that you have to do. This is the other one of the 3 that I originally showed you again, where do was under your pinky on your low E string simply because of the way the intervals fall. 1, whole step to 2, whole step to 3, half step to 4, whole step to 5, whole step to 6, whole step to 7, you've got to go out of the box, and then a half step to 8, you do an index finger shift going up the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Coming down, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But now coming down the scale, 8, reach out with your pinky, 7, because remember, that's just a half step below that note. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you only have that one finger shift you have to do. Now, do can move up again another note to where it can either be there or there on your next string. That's number 6 here. Now notice, now going up the scale, you would probably want to play your root note as an index finger reach out of the box on your A string now. Our root note is shifted from our low E string, where it was over here. It is now shifted to our A string. And the first one would be actually where the root note is an index finger reach out of the box. 1, whole step to 2, whole step to 3, half step to 4, which is another index reach, whole step to 5, whole step to 6, whole step to 7, half step to 8, next octave, 1, whole step to 2, whole step to 3 takes you to there because those are the strings that are tuned differently, half step to 4, whole step to 5, you're out of the box again. Whole step to 6, whole step to 7, and you could actually get your octave note out there. Coming down the scale, pinky reach, 8, shift down to 7, a half step below that, down to 6, down to 5 is another pinky reach. Back into the box with your third finger for 4, half step down to 3, 2 is under your pinky back in the box again, down to 1, half step you can think of this as 8 also, it's the octave note, 8, half step to 7, 6, 5, out of the box again, 4, pinky shift to 3, 2, and then your root note would be right there, and then 8, pinky shift down. Now, then we can look at this next column over there, and I'll just move it over to here again. In this case, now do is under your index finger within the box. A moment ago, in the previous one, it was right there, but now it's come up again. We are now playing in the next higher key, which would actually be in the key of E flat right there. That would be the 6th fret on your neck. But remember, these boxes can be played anywhere on the neck. This is another one. This one only has 3 finger shifts in it. 1, whole step to 2, out of the box for 3, index shift to 4. Remember, when we're going up the scale, we're not playing those notes right there. We're playing them with our index finger. 1, 2, 3, shift to 4, 5, reach out of the box, 6, 7, 8, second octave, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you can also play 7 up there. Coming down the scale, we're going to use these ones here. 7, 6, 5, 4, half step down to 3, whole step to 2. And so this is another one that's got a significant number of finger shifts in it, so it might not be one of the first ones that you actually want to learn. Now, if we look at this again, now do can once again move from under our index finger up a fret to our second fret on our A string, and that, of course, is this next box right here. These are all going in order. Each time your root note moves up another fret on the particular string. Now, this one is another fairly easy one. You've only got a couple of finger shifts that you have to work on. Up the scale, you're going to play those 4s. Remember, 4 is green, so those are both note number 4 right there. You only have a couple of finger shifts to do. Most of the other ones are within that 4 fret range that your fingers are actually controlling. Now, when your root note goes up another fret and we come to this box here, you've got another really tough one with finger shifts all over the place. That's number 9. Now, we can go one more up over to this one over here, where now the root note is under your pinky on your A string. Notice this is another one of the first ones I showed you. Just coincidentally, because of the way the intervals fall, you're not required to do any finger shifts. So this is probably the second one that you want to try to master. The second one of 12 different ways to play a major scale. It's an easy one, no finger shifts. 1, whole step to 2, whole step to 3, half step to 4, whole step to 5, whole step to 6, whole step to 7, half step to 8. You can go part of another octave, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's an easy one. If we go up again, up to the next one, do is going to change to either there or to there on your next string. It's time for us to move our root note over to our D string now. And this is another complicated one with a lot of finger shifts in it. Going up the scale, you're going to play these with your index finger. 1, whole step to 2, whole step to 3, reach out to get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, reach out to get number 2 on that string. Bunch of finger shifts in this one. This may not be one that you want to look at right away. Coming down the scale, you're going to use these notes that you play with your pinky instead. So you've got a bunch of pinky shifts coming down the scale. Now, do here was either an index reach or a pinky reach out of the box on your, and if we look here on your D string here. Now, the next key that you could play in would be if do moved up to here. And indeed, that's our last one here. Now do is under your index finger right here. And another way to play a major scale, 1, going up the scale again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You've got a couple of finger shifts there. Coming down this, which you play with your index finger. Coming down the scale, you're going to play those same 2 notes with your pinky down there. Now, this is number 12, right? I said there were 12 different ways to play a major scale, but I said do could be anywhere, right? Well, why isn't there a 13th one? Well, take a look at this. If do is under your index finger on your D string, the next one would be with do right there, under your second finger on your D string. Well, the thing is, in a way, that brings us back to our original one that we first started on up here. Because take a look at this note right here, and you'll actually see, good idea, you'll actually see that one is the original one, number 1. We originally looked at it with that being our root note, but now look at this. That's the octave above that. It's the second fret on your D string, which would have been the very next one after that, down there. So after you go through these 12 different ways to play a major scale, where's the 13th one? Well, you're kind of back to here again. You're back to the beginning again. You're just an octave higher. So in that sense, there are only these 12 different ways to play a major scale. Ha! Only 12. With all this finger shift stuff, I know this is a bit confusing. You're probably going to have to go over this several times. It's going to take you a long time to master all of these different patterns. Remember, it takes years to learn to play the guitar on a meaningful level. A level where you're going to satisfy yourself for the rest of your life playing the guitar. You don't, though, have to learn all of these different fingerings for right now. My advice is start with the major diatonic scale. Start with the easy ones where you don't have too many finger shifts, like number 3, which has none, number 5, which only has 1, and number 10, which has none. Then, maybe after you feel like you're pretty good with that, go to number 12 over here, which only has 2 finger shifts. And, and number 8, which only has 2 finger shifts. And then, after that, you can start going to like number 7, which has 3 finger shifts in there. Now, the beauty of this is, like, you might be going, why? Isn't it just good enough to just be able to play a major scale one different way? Well, no, it actually isn't. Because particularly when you're improvising and you need to be able to change from one scale in one key to another scale in another key instantly like that, you don't necessarily have time to move your fingers, your whole hand up and down the neck of the guitar. Let me grab my guitar here for a second and I'll show you what I mean. What if you only knew one way to play a major scale? And it was that first easy one that I showed you where Do is under your 2nd finger on your low E string. What if I wanted to play, in a song that I was improvising over, what if I needed to play a major scale in the key of A, and I only knew that easy one? Well, I'd have to put my hand here with my 2nd finger on the 5th fret and then play this easy major scale with no finger shifts. Oops. This is so easy to do. But what if the next instant in the song I was called upon to shift from an A major scale to a D major scale? It happens. It happens all the time. Now, if you only knew that one fingering for for a major scale, in order to get to a D major scale, you'd have to start here. And then in the next second, you'd have to jump your hand way up to here. And you would constantly have to be going back and forth. Which, I'm making it look pretty easy, but you don't have time to do these big jumps with your hand a lot of the time when you're improvising. So, what you need to be able to do is keep your hand in one place on the neck of the guitar, play a major scale in A here, where Do is under my 2nd finger, and then to play a D major scale, I want to keep my hands in this same area of the neck, but I need to play a D major scale. Now, where would a convenient D root note be? Well, actually, it would be right here under my pinky. It would be right here under my 2nd finger on my A string. So, to get to a D major scale, instead of jumping all the way up the neck here, all I really have to do is start with this finger pattern. Then when I want to play a D major scale, I just have to change my thinking so that now my root note is right there. I was playing an A major scale and a D major scale. Don't you see that that would be easier than doing this? Jumping my hand back and forth like this. If I knew all of the finger patterns on this chart, I could play any one of the 12 major scales without ever moving my hand. There's a big advantage to being able to do that. A lot of you are not going to see that for a while, but if you continue playing the guitar, you're going to find out that the less you have to move your hand around on the neck, there are a lot of advantages to that. And if you understand your chromatic scale, you'll understand that actually you can play all 12. You can play in all 12 keys with your hands anywhere on the neck. It's just some of those finger patterns are easier than others. Some have no finger shifts, some have a lot of finger shifts, some only have 1 finger shift, some only have 2. So the more of these 12 different ways to play a major scale that you can soak up, the better off you're going to be. It's a long road to hoe, I know that, but, you know, don't figure it's going to happen overnight. You got to figure it's going to be a couple of years, 3, maybe 4, maybe 5 years before you've really mastered this instrument. The more disciplined work that you can put into your grunt work, as I call it in the beginning, the better off you're going to be. You're going to get to be the type of player that's going to be able to satisfy themselves sooner, the more work you put into these things. Now, hopefully, you can see how that works. Do can be under any note, so there are actually 12 different fingerings for a major scale. You know what that also means? If we look back at our big chart here, so far, we're just looking at the major diatonic scale, our first one up at the top here. But there are these other 14, these other 13 scales that we want to learn about too. And the interesting thing then to realize is there are 12 different fingerings for every one of these scales. And that's where, if you look at your finger charts in there, you're going to see that you have a separate page with all of those, the 12 different ways to play all of those scales. Our next scale on our list here is the Lydian mode. Remember that one? That's another major scale. How do we know it's a major scale? If you remember back to last week, a scale that has note number 3 in it and note number 5 in it is a major scale. It's not the major diatonic scale. This one goes 1, whole step to 2, whole step to 3, but then it doesn't have a half step to 4. It has a whole step up to sharp 4. Half step to 5, whole step to 6, whole step to 7, whole step to 8. Let's listen to this one for a moment. I think we're going to run out of time. I know we are before we get to listen to all these, so we'll do it next time. But we'll go a little bit further, and you might be able to really see how these scales and these charts actually work as you go. Remember, here was our good old friend, the major diatonic scale, the do, re, mi scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Half steps between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. I'm doing these all in the key of C, by the way. If you look at your musical slide rule, remember on the scale side, the upper left-hand corner of your slide rule is the major diatonic scale. And if you set that up so that C, the alphabet letter C, is in the very upper left-hand corner, note number 1 up there, you'll notice that a lot of times we investigate scales from the point of view of the key of C because it's just easier. You don't have any black keys to play. A major diatonic scale is just the white keys on the piano. But now we're talking about this scale here, Lydian mode, which has a sharp 4. Now, this is on our must-know list, remember? I'm suggesting that you use this scale every day. You've hardly ever played a song that doesn't have this scale in it. And people go, really? How come I took music lessons for years and nobody ever told me that? Well, this is the fascinating world of modes that we're going to talk about in the next couple of hours. But let's listen to this scale. The Lydian mode is obviously, because it has a different interval pattern, it's obviously going to sound different than the major diatonic scale. It's going to sound very similar. It has 6 of the 7 notes the same. But what about that sharp 4? What does that sound like? Let's listen to it. 1, 2, 3, whole step up to this black key, sharp 4. Listen to that again. Here's how your regular do, re, mi scale goes. Half step from 3 to 4. But here we're going 3 whole step up to sharp 4. 8, 7, 6, 5, sharp 4, 3, 2, 1. And you're going, wow, that's a weird sounding scale. And you're going, boy, that's a weird sounding scale. I've never heard that scale before. The funny thing is, when it sounds kind of strange when you play it just by itself. But what you're going to find out is when these scales are actually inside of songs, you don't notice that exotic sound. They blend right into the song. In fact, it would sound different if you didn't do that. I was telling somebody the other day, a good example, if you investigate the melody to Silent Night, the Christmas carol, Silent Night, you're going to find that sharp 4 in there. It would sound weird if that sharp 4 wasn't in there. You're going, I don't hear that weird scale in Silent Night. But when we talk about modes, I'll actually show you that it is actually in there. Now, just like there were 12 different ways to play a major diatonic scale, the Ionian mode, there are also 12 different ways to play the Lydian mode here. And you have a sheet, once again, that has all of the 12 fingerings for your Lydian mode as well. And the same logic applies to this particular chart here. That is, each time do is going to move up 1 note. Now, for reasons that are too complicated to explain right here, right now, I started with do being a finger shift note, either a pinky shift note or an index shift note on your A string. So the next one here, See, there it is right there. The next one, do, is going to be a note higher, so it's going to be on that index finger fret, and sure enough, there it is right there. In the next one, do is going to have moved up another fret, so it winds up being under our second finger. And then in the next one, do is going to move up again to be under our third finger. And the next one, it's under our pinky again, right there. And then in the next one, it's going to move up again to be either there or there. And in the next one, it's going to move up to be under your index finger. In the next one, it's going to move up to be under your second finger. In the next one, it's going to move up to be under your third finger on your D string. Finally, then it's under your pinky on your D string. Then it shifts to being on your G string. Then it moves up a fret to be under your index finger there. And then finally, that is the last one. It's right there. Now, why isn't there another one after that? Because if it moved up one more, just like with the Ionian mode, if it moved up to be under your second finger on your G string, that would simply bring you back to this original one that we started on, right there. And you remember, exactly the same thing worked on there. So it turns out that there's only these 12 different fingerings, and then if you go on to the third one after that, the 13th one after that, it's going to just bring you back to the original one. So if we went up with our root note one more note above that to there, it would bring you back to this original one over here. See that red dot is one fret above where the red dot would be there. So that's all the different fingerings for your Lydian mode. Once again, there are some really easy ones that you're going to want to start off with. Again, it's number 3 and number 10. You're going to find out these are the easy fingerings because they have no finger shifts. There's going to be so my advice is when you're learning the Lydian mode, start off with the easy ones and go on to the other ones. Now, the next scale on our list is Mixolydian. That's another major scale right here. Remember, because it has note number 3 and it has note number 5 in it. But the thing that separates this from the major diatonic scale is you also have a flat 7 in it as well. So this scale goes 1, whole step to 2, whole step to 3, half step to 4, whole step to 5, whole step to 6, half step to flat 7, whole step to 8. Let's take a look at the keyboard here for a second, and let's see what that one would sound like. Here's our good old friend, the major diatonic scale again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Now here's the Mixolydian mode, which is the same except it has a flat 7 in it. Let's listen to what that would sound like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Half step to flat 7. Whole step to 8. Here's the major diatonic scale again, with note number 7. There's the flat 7 in Mixolydian. This is even a more common scale than the Lydian mode, which we just listened to a moment ago with the sharp 4. By the way, I didn't show you this. I'll show you the Mixolydian fingerings for a second. But another thing I want to show you about here is back when you're looking at these finger charts again, let's perhaps zoom in on this upper left-hand corner one up here and take a look at it. Remember our color coding system. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. The notes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They are just those colors. Now remember, Lydian mode has a sharp 4 in it, right? And 4, if you remember, is the color green. So take a look. If you can see this green dot right here, not only will you notice it's a green dot, but it also has a little sharp sign printed in it. So that's what indicates that that's actually a sharp 4 right there. And you'll see it's true. Every green dot on this page has a little sharp sign in it to remind you that Lydian mode has a sharp 4 in it. Here is the chart for the Mixolydian mode. Once again, you've got 12 different ways to play this scale, and in each one, your root note is moving up another note until you can play that same pattern in all 12 keys. Mixolydian has a flat 7. So if we can just zoom in real quickly on one of these, notice 7 is violet, right? 7 is purple. Notice there's a little flat symbol on all of your purple dots to remind you that that scale has a flat 7. Once again, you've got 12 different ways that you can play the Mixolydian mode. Some of them have no finger shifts. Start with those. Some of them have 1 finger shift. Go on to those. Some of them have 2 finger shifts. Now, next week, we're going to go on and we're going to look at all of these scales. We didn't get a chance to actually listen to them all today or look at the fingerings for all of them, but maybe I got you to see that that there are 12 ways to play any of these scales. You have those color-coded finger charts right in front of you there, so you can actually maybe get a little ahead of us right here and go on and look at some of those other ones if you like. But that's what we're going to do next time. And also, very importantly, we're going to be listening to all of our different scales. I didn't realize this is going to take as long as it was, but it is kind of hard to explain how those fingers chart works. Next time, we're going to go on to the minor scales and listen to what they sound like with their flatted thirds. We're going to look at pentatonic scales, and we're also going to look at the 12 different fingerings for all of these different scales. You'll notice that you have a color-coded finger chart for each one of those. So, like I said, I know this stuff is tough. You might have to look at this tape a couple of times, there's going to be other support material that you'll see in your booklet too. But it's not impossible, and we're here to help you any way we can. We'll talk more about this same subject next week. So until then, I'm Scotty West. Have a blast and keep on practicing, okay? We'll see you then. Bye-bye.